All right, so I've been waiting around for Davis, and he's out today. Sam's out today. Davis is also out. But we got Ben Gretsch. We got Dwain McFarland. This is ADP chasing. Let's go. ADP chasing is for when you watch ship chasing, you go, these guys are just football guys.
And the targets per outrun leagues, that's going to be really nice.
Actually, back in if it's Ashane.
Stare into our crystal ball. Close your eyes. All your entries are going to lose anyway.
Yeah, that's fair.
This is a Deuce Vaughn show.
It's anti-cabal. It's anti the best ball thought leaders. I'm obviously lying to some degree because, I have a lot of both of these guys.
It's the most disgusting pick you can make. But, man.
Pat, did you get Sam's slides?
Yeah, I do have Sam's slides.
Okay.
Yeah. But I got Sam's slides. They're uploaded, so we're all good there.
The cold open was I was not ready to do this.
I wasn't ready to do the cold open. I didn't have the brand. The Let's Go said as slowly as possible as I find the intro, found the ship chasing intro, then found the ADP intro seconds after that. So it's that kind of show. Honestly, this is already still above the 50th percentile for preparedness for an ADP chasing. So we're still good, but how you guys doing?
I'm good. You guys are making me feel great. I feel over prepared.
You are. I can guarantee you that you are. Yeah.
You're just how you guys doing? Let's welcome Dwain in. I mean, I've been around here. People know me on ship chasing. Dwain, you do incredible work over at Fantasy Life. You had there's a lot of different write-ups about the preseason stuff. I mentioned in mine, which is a little bit more what I felt like I saw from a talent perspective, that if you want the specific data, the one that I really enjoyed the most was your write-up, which is very straightforward. And you also obviously had some takes in there too, but I love the way that you, break down the actual, the usage numbers. So definitely recommend that for anybody who's looking for all the data from preseason week 1. But yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I think about it, it's the tip of the iceberg, right? We know there's all these things that go into what the coaches are going to ultimately do on week 1 and what these rosters are going to look like, how they're going to deploy everyone. And really the preseason's only a small part of it, but we can see it and we can actually go look at the data. We can look at the information. We can watch these players on film. So we hyper analyze it. I do think it's very valuable. I think you have to be careful not to overanalyze it. I think it can take you in the wrong direction at times as well. But again, it's the one thing we have to look at. So, you write a 7,000 word column on it and you stay up all night, grinding film and looking at all the data so that you can get it out. But where I think it becomes the most helpful is whenever you can start to marry these things with all the other things that have already happened, right? Like how the team spent their draft capital, where they invested their money in free agency, what they've been telling us all off season, what are we hearing in camp? And once all those things start to add up, obviously you get certain players where everything clicks, right? It's oh, we heard that. Now we're seeing that, in the preseason. That's really good. Most times it's 2 out of 3 of those things you feel pretty good, because you're not going to normally get them all to align. Or if they do, they're players that we're already on, right? They're, oh, great. The starters all rested. Well, yeah, we know that. We know who the starters are for the team. So I still love it though, because it's that one, it's the puzzle piece, right? And we're just trying to put all those pieces together. So excited to join you guys.
Did anything kind of jump out to you from the preseason stuff? I know one that was probably the big scary one for a lot of people was the Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett stuff.
I got to jump in here because I get this question, and I write certain signals in season. Dwain, you write the utilization report, which is incredible. I love did anything stand out? Yeah, I watched all 32 teams. There's a lot of shit that stood out, right? I can't just name one thing.
Well, that's why I was directing to the Cole Kmet one. That one, I think, had a lot of that one had a lot of impact in sort of the perception of things. Did that stand out to you as far as the Everett and Kmet stuff?
Yeah, it definitely stood out to me because with Shane Waldron, we've got this kind of a long running trend now, which is so weird because he comes from the Sean McVay tree, which is the most 11 heavy personnel offense in the league. Well, he's in Seattle last year. Well, he was in Seattle the last few years, but last year you have Jackson Smith and Jigba as a first round pick. You have DK Metcalf, you have Tyler Lockett. What does he do? He goes out there and he uses 11 personnel 63% of the time. He was slightly above the league average. No, you got to get Colby Parkinson on the field. We got to have Will Disley on the field. We got to have Noah Fant on the field. Now, part of me thought, well, maybe that's really Pete Carroll, because these guys, they get told certain things or certain things that are mandated to you as a coordinator. So we can't always assume it's an apples to apples when a guy moves. But then we come out in the preseason, like it's just not encouraging. You know, we go out and we see that Rome Odunze has a 50% route participation with the starters. DJ Moore was at 63%. And then you already mentioned it with Kmet and Gerald Everett. They were the same. So they want to use 12 personnel. They did invest in Gerald Everett. Like if I'm the coach of the Bears, like I'm just like, hey, we're just going to put our 3 wide receivers out there and let's see where the chips fall. We got this young quarterback and Caleb Williams. As much as I like Gerald Everett, he's not as good as Rome Odunze. It's not an equal trade-off. Let's get Rome Odunze on the field. So, yeah, I'm definitely concerned about the Bears, but I think it's not just Kmet, man. I think they could rotate all these guys. Keenan didn't leave the field in this game, but again, this can be one of those tricky things where they maybe as a coaching staff said, hey, in game 1, we're just going to let Keenan get all of his reps out of the way, and we're just not going to risk it with him the rest of the preseason. Like we have to see what they do in the rest of these games. My guess is they're going to rotate all 3 guys, though, and it could hurt all 3 of them.
That's interesting. Yeah. I didn't think about it in terms of Everett coming on the field instead of like DJ Moore, because that's just so stupid. but
I don't think it's possible.
Problem. What about the backfield? Because that's also rotation. Did that worry you at all? Because one of the things that's very funny to me is that like we've spent the entire offseason freaking out about like we can't draft anyone from uncertain backfields because Khalil Herbert and Samaje Perine are both going to sign there and then be the 1-2. And like neither of them might get cut.
Exactly. Well, Khalil Herbert, like he rotated in on like the second play of this game. He took the second rushing attempt. It might have been the third play, but he took the second rushing attempt. DeAndre Swift took the first one. Then, you know, Herbert rotated back off and you had the crazy screenplay, where Caleb Williams, a lot of people, it's like the announcers like, oh man, pressure up the middle, about to get sacked. Like it's a middle screenplay, dude. Like this is a design play, and Caleb still made this great play. Like it's a no-look pass, back over to Swift, who takes off for 42 yards. But yeah, the week before it was Roschon Johnson, Hall of Fame game. You kind of got to like wad it up and just throw it in the trash. But Roschon played first, and then Khalil Herbert played. Well, Roschon wasn't even active yesterday. So I think right now I'm keeping Swift as the lead guy, but I've only got him at 45% of the attempts. And I've got him at like a 35% route participation. And then I have the other 2 guys splitting the rest of the work, kind of waiting to see if like, enough camp news or something through preseason helps us determine which one we would put, higher over the other. My concern is like they all kind of have sub roles. Like I think Swift is the base package. Then I could see Johnson taking the passing down reps, but Khalil Herbert really being the main guy that takes any of the other carries away from Swift. But honestly, we don't know for sure. We just really don't know how they're going to deploy this backfield. That's
how I kind of think the backfield could go. But the other thing, and I saw you mention this as well, Dwayne, that really stood out is Caleb Williams looked as advertised. He made some really great plays. And if we think like, okay, this offense is going to be really good. Like I've always been really high on Keenan and DJ Moore, and then I'm a UW guy, and I really like Rome Odunze, and I'm like, I think this is like my favorite trio of receivers. And like, so yeah, the usage stuff is really concerning to me, but I'm really high on this offense. I'm high on the backfield for the stuff that I've always called the high value touches, the receptions, and the potential for touchdowns should go up. It should go up for Swift, especially when he was in an offense last year where he wasn't getting a lot of that. I mean, he was getting green zone touches, but kept going down at the 1 yard line for whatever reason. But I do think the running backs in this offense should score some touchdowns. They should catch plenty of passes. And so then it's a thing of like, okay, it's really crowded at the skill positions, but if Caleb is that good and this offense is that good, we can also go back to that thing where it's like, yeah, sometimes the crowdedness holds down ADPs, but there's contingent upside, right? Like if one of these guys misses time, if Gerald Everett misses time, then we're all fucking happy. This guy's 30 years old. He's been banged up before.
Are they going to sign like, I don't know, Chris Manhertz? They're going to trade for Chris Manhertz? Like what this seems like philosophical at this point.
Perhaps they do actually have Mercedes Lewis on the
roster. There you go.
Well. So
Mercedes Lewis, 18th round pick.
I'm with Ben. I think that Caleb is the best way that none of this matters. And you really are hitting on something. Like when we have these really good offenses, we shouldn't get so concerned. I would rather have the players in the really good offenses, even over certain guys that I know are just going to get the volume, because that volume can be misleading. Even though they're talented players and they're earning that volume, it can really be misleading. A lot of the fantasy points are going to come from the best offenses. And to your point, Ben, like when you watch Caleb, like he's just doing things that you just don't see everybody else do. I mean, it's 3rd and 12. He's got a check down setting right in front of him, like 7 yards in front of him. Most quarterbacks that are rookies are taking it. They're just going to check it down.
Most veterans are taking it. Kirk Cousins is throwing that pass every time.
Yes, he is.
He waits a beat more. He drills it into DJ Moore, picks up the first down on 3rd and 12. Everybody obviously saw the big highlight. Everybody saw was him rolling to his right, the throw to, Cole Kmet, second layer throw throw, right on the sideline. That was a great play. Then they also saw the screen play. But I mean, this guy, like, those aren't things you're seeing really from everyone else. And the Bills were actually trying to disguise some coverages and stuff. I thought Hayden Winks did a great job of kind of pointing that stuff out in some tweets that he sent out yesterday. Like, not all defenses are the same. They are trying to, practice certain things. Yeah, it's mostly vanilla, but they were doing some things to Caleb, and he was identifying them, and he was really, answering everything like that they threw at him. So I am with you. He's still a rookie quarterback though. So it's like, there is this unknown. It is still preseason. So how much of it can we take? Like last year, everybody got excited about Kenny Pickett. What happened in week 1? Like, he just gets bitch slapped, right? I mean, it's just like, he looked terrible. He looked great in the preseason. Sam Howell, actually like threw for quite a few yards, I guess. He just got sacked all the time.
Yeah.
So quarterbacks are the hardest thing to evaluate, in my opinion, in the preseason, but there were these specific things that if you go back and this is why I think you do have to watch the film too on these players. You can't just look at the data. Whenever you look at Caleb Williams, he did 3 or 4 things that you just don't see other quarterbacks do. And I think that's very encouraging.
I love when you said everybody was in on Kenny Pickett, and I absolutely was, but Pat's face was just like, I wasn't.
I wasn't. Not only was I not, I had to hear about it for 2 years how it should be.
Yeah. I overreacted to that one. Hand up.
I did too. And in my defense, Pat, I feel like most of the time I was like, we don't know yet. Was more my
yeah.
Like,
I was like, buddy, we do.
You were right. Like,
I definitely hedged on Kenny in all my writing. I was like, maybe, but maybe. If you squint.
My thing with Kenny is my prior on him was it's like, this guy probably sucks. Like, he's a 3rd round pick who went in the 1st round.
And
so
you were right.
I was like, show me something. Show me something one time. Show me something one time, Kenny. He never did. All right, rookies. The rookie stuff. This is when it starts to be like a little less fun, right? We get to dream all May and June. We're dreaming about week 17, but then you get hit in the face with like, hey, Tez Walker's like the wide receiver 8. Does that bother you?
Yeah,
it's like
Luke McCaffrey is like, oh, Jahan Dotson's just gonna play the slot now.
Is the slot. Is that a problem? It probably is. Jermaine Burton's like, wide receiver 6 or something right now. Like, lots of these guys are further down the depth chart than we would like. Not all of them. I was pretty encouraged by AD Mitchell, getting some run out of the slot. But
Sean Payton doesn't know Troy Franklin's on his roster.
Yeah, this other dude, Veely, who's 26 and he turns 27 in December. That's not a bit. This is not Davis. I'm not adding years. He really turns 27 in December.
Oh, you mean I have an old, slow, big receiver? Let's get him in.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So
I saw Lil Jordan Humphrey on at one point, and I was like, that doesn't look like Mims, but he's number 17. It's like, I think Mims used to be 17, and now he's not. Now he's 19. I don't know. I got confused by the number.
Well, Mims played one snap and then left, and
right.
Played in
and then came back. If you're gonna play one snap,
happened?
Please don't come back.
Yeah,
I can talk myself into you being rested if you play one snap and leave.
I just had this moment where I was like, "Oh, Mims is on," and then I was like, "No, that's Little Jordan Humphrey." As far as your point about these old, like big, slow guys, like, oh, great.
Get ready to have
Jordan
that feeling
Humphrey.
again during the season.
Right.
But like, obviously, the big one last year, Devon Achane was like 4th or whatever on the depth chart. I think inactive week 1. Didn't turn out to be a problem, so we don't want to overreact. But at the same time, like, a lot of these dart throw rookies are gonna fail. And so it's like, it's a tricky thing where you're like, this is real information. It probably should like make us a little bit more cautious in certain cases, but then you also don't want to just write off everyone who's not in line for a starting job right away.
Yeah, and I feel like I worry about it less with the running backs, right? Like I kind of anticipate this, and we have seen more of the running backs, have to work their way up the depth chart. But then suddenly, you guys talk about it all the time. An injury, chaos happens in the season.
Yeah.
And suddenly Jalen Wright's on the field. And all I care really is that he looked fantastic when he was on the field. And that's really all I care about with Jalen Wright. I'm not even worried about the depth chart at this point. It's like, it's a Miami offense. I don't care if he's 4th. I don't care if he's 3rd on the depth chart. Like, if something opens up and that guy ever gets on the field, I'm going to wish he was in my fantasy lineup. And really, even for less talented running backs, because we know it just comes down to volume. Like, they've got 10 other players doing a job and they get handed the ball, and then, they're going to get points. It's just a matter of how many. But at receiver, it is definitely more concerning because we want to see them get first team reps. We want to see them get work with the starters. If they're struggling early on, we've seen it more often with the wide receivers that this can be really problematic. So McCaffrey not getting any work, scared to death, moved him down. Devontae Walker, you mentioned, not getting out there with a starter, scared to death, moved him down. Not drafting Troy Franklin anymore. Not drafting Quentin Johnston ever again, probably in my life, I guess. It
we
just
took him out of the
more.
dynasty rankings today.
Oh my God, that's
that's where we're at.
Low. You can't even be in the dynasty ranking.
Yeah, top 250. Sorry.
Yeah, so the receivers worry me more. So not to say that some of these guys can't work their way back up the depth chart. We've got one data point. Well, obviously we'll follow it for the next couple, and then we'll be following all the training camp stuff or the practice stuff. But yeah, the receivers, it's really, really concerning in my opinion.
Franklin's the one I'm still in on. 18th round dart throw still, because my thinking is, I know you had the day 3 draft capital, which is a major concern, but it's like Tim Patrick, Josh Reynolds. The fact that Mims has not established himself is bullish for Franklin, right? It's like there's a path still, and just in terms of him, if he's good, there he can get on the field over the course of the season or just at the end of the season. And then the Bo Nix connection. I just can't stop. That's worth something to me. So I'm still going to be drafting some Franklin, but he obviously took a hit. You don't want to be drafting him in the 15th or whatever.
Yeah. By the end of the year, like somebody that's young on the Broncos has to be playing, right? Because they're not going to be good.
Please.
I mean, so they're going to have to look at these guys.
Please, Sean.
Right.
Play someone young.
I had that as I tweeted this morning as being pretty sort of veteran deference. Yonke had his write up and he talked about P9 clearly having a role because he was playing on passing downs. I had basically the opposite opinion when you factor in that Jarrett Stidham also started and they started Mims to try to sort of make a point, but then also did the veteran deference thing at receiver. And then the thing about P9 is how did he actually play? Well, he got a swing pass to him that hit him right here, and he juggled it and hit it in the air like a Three Stooges skit for an interception. It's like, you're already on the roster bubble, bud. Like, you got to catch the swing pass. That's what you do. You're literally a receiving back. Not a great moment for him.
So the veteran deference at wide receiver, though, I get it at quarterback and running back for sure, but Josh Reynolds is new to the team, and Tim Patrick hasn't. I mean, maybe I could see it with Tim Patrick because he's been on the roster, but he's not really put in reps with Sean Payton yet. So Reynolds getting veteran deference over Mims is the veteran of the program.
Well, I mean, Reynolds has been in the league a lot longer. He's played on
sure, but I mean, as far as coaching,
this is his third team. He signed a veteran contract this offseason. Mims is a second-year player.
Yeah, I know he's been in the league longer, but I'm saying as far as who the loyalty goes to, it would be Mims, not Reynolds, the free agent addition from the Lions.
I think the fact that he's a 29-year-old receiver they brought in free agency matters. Mims is a 22-year-old right now? Yeah, he's 22.
I think the fact that it matters concerns me for Mims. If that matters, then that's a problem. So then
the second element of it is he came back in for the Knicks snaps. And so I want to see, because they've already said Knicks is going to start next week. And I think Knicks played well enough that he's probably the overwhelming favorite to start week 1 was my takeaway. He wasn't great. I saw some other people be like, I mean, that's being overstated. His downfield passing wasn't perfect, but he made a really nice throw on a third down rolling to his left to Cortland Sutton on the sideline on the first drive. And then after they pushed it downfield a little bit early, he threw a bunch underneath. He threw to the tight ends a lot. He threw to the running backs. He threw a nice little wheel route to Jaleel McLaughlin on their last drive. And it was accuracy underneath, which is what Sean Payton wants. And that's why Bo Nix is the right fit. And so he's going to not make enough mistakes that that's what Payton wants you to do, right? He scrambled a little bit, showed some mobility. I think he's starting week 1. I'm really interested to see how the rotation is next week when he starts the week 2 preseason game. Because I kind of, with the Mims starting and then coming back in thing, I kind of thought it was
let's get him some reps.
Payton already knows this is our week 1 starter at quarterback, and I want Mims playing with him a little, because Sutton actually stayed on with Nix as well. So I mean, I just think Payton's rotation was really weird, and I don't want to read too much into who.
I like that. I like that take of playing with Nix. That is interesting. And man, Tim Patrick and we obviously they're in the rankings, but I couldn't feel less excited about Tim Patrick or Josh Reynolds. That's just. There's kind of the Zay Jones path to Best Ball Mania victory or relevance where you get that big spike week. But that, I think his was in week 16. So you're telling me these guys last to week 16. I really struggle to see it with either guy.
Yeah, I don't even want to click on Cortland Sutton.
I mean, just play the running backs.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the running backs? Like, because it is a weird situation. I think you're really onto something, Ben. Like, that's the context. Like, you have to think through. And I was mentioning it earlier. There's different reasons behind like why coaches use certain players a certain way in the preseason. I mentioned it with the Keenan thing. Like, for all we know, they're like, hey, let's just get him his reps this week, and then we're not going to bother with it, and he's fine. Right. And we'll let Rome play the rest of the preseason. Who knows? The rest is still to come. But I do think it was very interesting, to your point. Like, Mims is out there one snap and then gone, but plays with Knicks.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think on Javonte?
Right. When you ask about the running backs, I have to reverse my whole take because Javonte only played with Stidham. But I took that to mean that he's very clearly the number one because I'm Javonte.
That's why
he's a second teamer, dude. That's basically the second team.
I'm driving the Javonte bus, so he has to be perfect. No, my big takeaway was, so they brought in McLaughlin next. So Perine played it with the first team as well. And then they brought in McLaughlin to play most of the Knicks stuff. And then they brought in Estime. I liked that Estime was playing on passing downs. He was playing on like blitz pickups, and he actually looked half decent to me. He caught all 3 targets from at least one from Knicks, maybe 2 from Knicks, and then he stayed on with Zach Wilson, and he caught one from Zach Wilson, and he looked like comfortable catching the ball. For a guy who didn't catch a lot of balls in college, it's nice to see that. And so that's the big thing about the Perine thing is like Estime. I think Peyton cares about size. I've talked about this take all off season, but he's actually mentioned it.
Size, so I'm sure he does.
Right. He won't stop talking about it, you said?
Yeah, he won't stop talking about size.
Right.
It's at wide receiver and running back, but he just talks about it constantly.
Size.
Yeah, he always has this mix, though. Like, he always has a small scat back that we're trying to figure out. What was like Trenton Cannon
Joker,
or something.
I think he calls that.
Yeah, the Joker. He's always got somebody.
That's what's weird because they gave Blake Watson like the 3rd most guaranteed money of any UDFA, the most of any running back. And I thought Watson looked good at the very end as well, although he played after like Tyler Beatty as well. So he was like really late. But I think a lot of people are expecting Watson to make the team because they gave him so much guaranteed money on the UDFA market. And he kind of fits this profile of a Peyton back. But if he does and Perine doesn't, then you have 2 of the smaller backs with McLaughlin and Watson is pretty small. And so then it's only Javonte and Estime, which is why those are the 2 that I've been hammering. I'm still kind of confused about it, to answer, like, back to your question, to answer it. But I was the big thing that I took away from this was I was optimistic about Estime in the passing game.
Nice. That is pretty cool. I mean, I suppose the simplest explanation would be that he's still figuring out who his backfield is going to be. And I like your point about, like, they're basically being 2 first-team opportunities to go show something. So, Perine getting those first reps, I was like a little concerned that meant he was making the team, and maybe it does, but it's probably like less bullish than it might be with a. I know this is gonna be my starting quarterback week 1 type of 1 setup.
Yeah, the fun thing is we could just make up whatever we want to believe, or at least that's what I'm doing with the Broncos. Oh yeah, no, Javonte with the first team is good. The Perine with the first team is bad.
Dude, that's bad actually for Perine. All right, let's look at some risers and fallers here. Deebo Samuel. I don't know if you guys are like, so we took Deebo Samuel at the 301 in a main event over the weekend or just before the weekend, and then like hours later, the Aiyuk is gonna re-enter into negotiation stuff broke. But what's interesting is that in drafts today, still seeing Deebo go kind of in the early 2nd round on underdog. So it doesn't seem like people are backing off of the Deebo aggressiveness yet. I don't know, like, how are you guys playing Deebo right now?
Well, it's tough because we don't know. Can one of you guys tell me what's going on with the Aiyuk thing? Because they had talked negotiations all off season, presumably have talked through every type of possible deal they could talk through: long-term, short-term, more guaranteed money, rearranging the deal just for this year, whatever, and got to the point they did with all the trade stuff because their incentives didn't align, right? They don't want to have to pay Aiyuk a long-term contract when they have to extend Purdy next year and they have already paid Deebo and all this other stuff. Why all of a sudden are they finding something to talk about that's new? That's what I don't understand.
I think they did the Lamar Jackson thing where they, it's one thing to tell yourself as Aiyuk, like, whatever, man, I'll go play anywhere. there's 31 other teams, and I'll go play there if these guys aren't going to pay me. And then you like have to stare down going to join an Arthur Smith offense, and you're kind of like, okay, let's talk a little more and see if there's a deal we can reach here.
So you think they won the game of check-in with Aiyuk?
I think they may have. I mean, we'll see. I don't know how far apart they are and everything, but I think this tactic worked, and it at least created a second conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing with Deebo is interesting because like you could end up ranking him like as a mid-range, round 2 pick anyway. Like, I mean, he's in a range where you could take him anywhere from the middle of round 2 to the middle of round 3. So I never thought there was a ton of risk with like taking him at the 1-2 turn. But it is interesting that people are not backing off. I do feel like the most likely outcome now is that he is a 49er and people are continuing to take him there. So like I could feel like middle of second round, fine. There's still maybe there's a chance like some other deal happens and he does get traded, if things break down. But I mean, the 49ers have all the leverage. So I just don't understand like how Aiyuk gets out of town unless he ends up saying, yeah, and changes his mind that he's going to play for one of these teams that presumably like right now he doesn't really want to play for. So the interesting part like is Aiyuk, where is he going now, Pat? Because I didn't draft yesterday, but the day before, like he was still going in the third round.
He's the biggest faller. Yeah. So are you guys? I feel like it's time to scoop up Aiyuk here.
I have been.
Yeah.
I was.
It's confusing. That part of it's confusing to me as well. Like, what has changed for Aiyuk? Like, why? If you don't want to take him higher than this, then why were you taking him in the second round all off season? That's the part that I don't. Because I
think so. The thing that as I think through
Steelers offense, I think
Steelers offense. Yeah, he's got to fall. He probably goes to kind of where Pickens was, maybe a little bit higher, but like in that range.
If the trade happens,
if the trade happens, maybe he does fall more to the fourth. Pickens would obviously fall considerably, but yeah, you're getting. But I think that at this price, more upside is available by picking him than taking on downside. I think there's an opportunity.
Don't you guys think he's most likely a Niner? I mean, so if that's the case, then this is a value.
Right.
I think it's a value.
But there's probably at least a little something to be said where if he doesn't get back in camp soon, that, we talked about this a little on ship chasing, I think last week, Pat, where it's like this time last year, we were hearing just constant positive buzz about Aiyuk and it foretold a great season. And, no one could guard him in camp. He was tearing it up. And the years prior, he was in the doghouse, and those were not good years for Aiyuk. Like, I'd love him to actually be practicing and like hearing good reports and showing up week 1 and being just as good as he was last year and having as big of a role as he had last year is maybe a little bit of a risk.
Do you think the doghouse stuff sort of poisoned the well here? He was like, you put me in the dog. Who was he behind? He had him running behind someone absurd.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Just absolutely. It was Trent Sherfield, or I think it might have even been worse than that. And it was just like, seriously? Like, now it's time. You got to pay for that. You got to pay up for putting me in the doghouse.
When was that? Like, was that 2020?
No, it wasn't Pettis. Pettis was in a worse doghouse.
Pettis was one before. Yeah.
Yeah. He iced Pettis.
It might have been Trent Sherfield.
Jeez, it was 2021. Let's see. They had Richie James, Mohamed Sanu, Trent Sherfield, River Craycraft. It might have been River Craycraft. He was on the team that year.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurd was on that team. There's a name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Running back, wide receiver hybrid.
Yeah. Let me go back to the risers here. Cooper Kupp. Here's another one. We got Cooper Kupp rising up 3 spots, 11%. And then we got Puka falling. He's down 1 spot, but I mean, it's a decent change when you're now. It probably doesn't change much with Puka because he's just like you took Garrett Wilson at 10 now, or at 11. Now you take him at 10. You take Puka at 11. I'm not seeing him fall like. Well, actually, sometimes I'm seeing him fall past the 1-2 turn, and you can get him at like the 202, 203. Which I think
it was Chess Liam that posted a screenshot of Bijan and Puka.
Ooh,
this morning or yesterday.
That's beautiful.
This is one where it feels like they are, as Kupp gets more pricey and Nacua can't really fall that far, it feels like they are probably collectively overpriced. And yet I don't think it's wrong because that's how I feel. Care about outlier upside. We care about ceiling. And we know that in this offense and for both of these players independently, they've already shown it, that if they're the focal point of the passing game for any stretch of time, they're going to be like a top 3 wide receiver, right? Top 5. They're going to be very, very important. The Kupp stuff is like, okay, well, there's some risk that Nacua is going to be able to back up last year. Kupp's actually the healthier one right now. I mean, probably kind of feels like a value still. Like I'm struggling with like how high should I be rising him in my ranks, because I mean I could see a case for having him like middle of the second round, right? Like if you actually think that the offense is going to flow through him again, like some of these beat reports are saying.
Yeah,
I've been kind of fading Kupp like as he's been rising. I mean, he's age 31. He's struggled more and more against man coverage the last 2 years. Now he's been injured, so like that's obviously part of it. You're going out and trying to beat press man coverage and you're hurt. Like that's going to be an impact. We've also had Stafford battling like health issues, like even though he's been playing a lot of the games. So like those things are obviously baked in. But yeah, like as Cooper Kupp like has made it like towards the 2-3 turn, like I've just found myself not really clicking on him. Maybe I'll change my mind at some point and be like, well, if I want my exposure, like I'm going to have to do it. I do agree. And like when you know, like the person Cooper Kupp is and like how he got to where he is, he showed up weighing like, 45 pounds, to college, and he turns into a starting wide receiver. Like I don't want to bet against a person like that. Like I know he's going to do his part. He's going to do everything he needs to do to be ready to go. He's going to take care of his body. He's going to be in lockstep with Stafford. So like if he has another season in him, like he's going to get it out of himself. So like I like that mentality. So just making me rethink. I mean, maybe I need to reconsider my stance, because I've really just been like, no, because I've just been assuming the Puka Nacua stuff is pushing him up. And once we hear Puka's back, like Kupp falls back down the board, and then I start taking him again.
It does remind me of the Deebo stuff where, people in the chat were saying like, we just needed a reason to get Deebo, up there. Like Drake London vaulted up like massively. He was going in like the 3rd, 4th round of the big board, and then Cousins signed, and he went in the early 3rd, late 2nd of the end of the big board, and kind of just kept making his way up. But it just, to me, his rise kind of shows how flat that tier is. So Deebo, like, yeah, maybe he just kind of stays up near the top. And in the same way, like Kupp can kind of make his way up a lot of places.
That flat tier, man, like Malik, like is the other name that like if I stare at each name and I'm like, now the ankle injury and like the news we heard this morning is a little different than what we heard yesterday. So obviously like we got to wait and like see what's up with that. But like every name I would look at, I would be like, okay, I could take Malik Neighbors over him. Then I would get to the next name. I could take Malik Neighbors over him. And so, I mean, I moved him up multiple spots, in my ranks, at least ahead of the older guys, right? Where I know like, 22% of the time, like, these age 31 plus wide receivers, like when they fall off, we get no warning, nothing. Like it just, they were elite. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're a wide receiver for the next season. So 1 in 5 times. So I'm like, like I'll just move Malik Neighbors ahead of those names at least. So I'm wondering what y'all's thoughts are on that. I think obviously the injury is going to slow things down for him, but I know I saw some people be like, oh my God, once he gets to the 2-3 turn, like I'm out. I just kept taking him.
I'm fully in on Neighbors. I mean, I've taken him a ton. I'm at 19%. He's one of my highest drafted players, 5th highest drafted overall.
Yeah, again, it gets back to this thing of like you were just talking about with the flat tier of like who you actually want to prioritize. In some of our mains so far that Pat was alluding to, like we took Deebo at the 301, like when we were discussing that, I was throwing out some names. If you look at ADP, like Neighbors was clearly behind them, but I was very clearly including Neighbors. I was, if you guys were like, let's go Neighbors, I would have been like, yeah, let's go Neighbors. Like, but like we were looking at Deebo and Kupp and Neighbors, and I think Waddle was there. Like, you have a strong group there, and it is like that's a guy that I have not moved Kupp ahead of Neighbors, and frankly, think Neighbors should probably be going ahead of Harrison. When we talked through this a little, Pat, but when I went through the projections, like just felt like the upside case was so bold. You're on that too as well, Dwain, right? You like
on my projections. I mean, I'm baking ADP just like you guys do into the way you're handling your rank. So I mean, I'm assuming people are drafting a lot of teams. So to get your exposure, you're going to want to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. But I do have Neighbors projected slightly ahead of where I have Marvin Harrison Jr. And that's despite having a quarterback, and Daniel Jones that's only averaged 218 passing yards per game in the games where he's played at least 90%, of the snaps. So clearly Kyler's the better quarterback, but once you subtract, Trey McBride, who I think is also really good, like they get close. They get super close. And
even just like
think about
Michael Wilson, like I like Greg Dortch, I feel like there's more. Like when I went through the Giants passing game, I was like, this only works if it's all through Neighbors. And with the Cardinals, I was like, it has to be through Harrison too, but not as much, Yeah. I don't know. It's just something.
Yeah, I can definitely see that case. And I think that's probably like accurate to have them very close or have Neighbors slightly ahead. I do think the floor outcomes are so much better for Harrison. And also just like as a prospect, like one of the highest floor prospects we've ever seen. But like, you get good coaching. I think Neighbors has that too, but you got good coaching, you got better quarterback play. The offense should put up points. And then the ceiling outcomes, I think, are pretty high too, where Harrison, like if Harrison ends up being the type of player we're considering at like 101, 102 next year, Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch weren't a problem. That's like,
I don't think they will be. I think it's mostly McBride. Like,
Yeah,
I think
it's
the
mostly
range of
McBride.
outcomes, like, so, like,
but he's a tight end, like if he's that good, like even McBride isn't. Yeah.
I think like the range of outcomes is like for both of them. But more specifically, like I agree with you on Harrison. I do think that like the upside is like we've at least seen Kyler, have a year where, he could be a 4,000 plus yard passer. We've never seen that from Daniel Jones, right? I mean, Kyler, if everything clicked right, now it hasn't been every year. It's only been 1 year, but like he could throw for 4,400 yards. Like it's a possibility at least. We know Daniel Jones is never doing that. So I do feel like the ceiling for Marvin Harrison Jr. is you could get a Jamar Chase rookie type season, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the middle ground is you get it for both guys. I think you
similar.
get a Jalen Waddle season. Jalen Waddle, Tua was not good at that point. He didn't have Tyreek Hill. Everybody wasn't for sure what he was. He was like a 220 yards per game guy. But everything, like what Ben was talking about, went through Waddle, all this low ADOT stuff.
That's actually a really interesting comp. Because I think they would give him that design stuff at the very least, Neighbors.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the low end what I meant when I brought up like
the rookie season.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys that like Wilson and Dortch don't matter. But essentially when you have McBride and then have those guys, I felt like I feel like you were talking about the design stuff in the Waddle scenario. The Waddle scenario is so comparable because it was like there was no one else. Like so just everything went through Waddle. And that's what it feels like with Neighbors. And
Neighbors is a great pick. Like he's just a great pick.
He's a really good pick.
But I do love that discount. Like so don't.
But I like that point you made on Kyler because I think Kyler's a really fun play as well. And this is the first time. I mean, if you are not super high on Cliff Kingsbury, which I'm not, this is the first time. I thought Petzing did a really nice job last year with what they had offensively. This is the first time he's going to play in like a functional offense. This is a guy who was an absolute elite player in high school. Was an elite player in college, broke passing efficiency records. And people are just like, oh, Kyler, he's that short dude that plays COD. Like, no, that's not, you don't understand who he actually is, probably. Multi-sport athlete, got drafted in the first round of baseball, too.
Call of Duty's a sport now, Ben?
Nationally ranked in Call of Duty.
Yeah. Speaking of athletic quarterbacks, Justin Fields. Is this the high water mark for him at this point? Because it seems like maybe he didn't seize the opportunity. What are you guys thinking?
It looked like Justin Fields to me. I mean, I love Justin Fields as like a fantasy play, obviously, but it's like where once you get to real life stuff, it's like it just doesn't ever seem to work out for him. Like always taking the sacks. Like we want quarterbacks that are willing to buy time and hold the ball a beat longer, right? And find, the player on the scramble drill or whether it's from the pocket. And so it's like you kind of hoped that like his average time to throw would eventually turn into that he would just get a better feel for things.
This sums up his whole career.
Yeah.
He looked great. And
and fumbling snaps. It's like, come on, like we can at least get the snap right, So look, I think Russ is cooked. So if I'm a defensive coordinator, I will tell you this, I would be more worried about playing Justin Fields than I would be Russell Wilson.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the Steelers know that. So I still feel like at some point Justin Fields is on the field, this year as a starter. But I just knowing Mike Tomlin and his ability to patch things together and always keep seasons close, his defensive-minded mentality. Like Mike Tomlin doesn't mind just coaching a close game and hoping the ball bounces his way, right? He's like, hey, it's not the ball's not a circle. It could just bounce our way. Like it's just
he hired Arthur Smith. He hired
exactly.
Arthur Smith.
So
like he's watched football in the last couple of years, I would assume.
I do feel like Russ is starting early, but I feel like Fields eventually has to play.
Yeah,
just because I think Russ can't play in this league. The way that defenses play now, like it took everything good he does away.
Yeah, that's a great point. The field stuff is so crazy because I think that point about he looked great and terrible, and like I think we all kind of agreed like when he does have the throw, he's an accurate passer. He's obviously athletic. He has like all these traits that should make him a really good quarterback, and then it's like, is it a fatal flaw how long he holds the ball or how long he needs to process or however you have to say. And that's all the question is like, is it a fatal flaw? And typically it is. It keeps him from being able to do everything else that he does well. And yet there are these like moments in time where you're like, well, when it's not a fatal flaw, everything else shows up. And that's exciting. Like,
yeah. I think
like a lot of the best passers do what he's doing. Aaron Rodgers holds the ball.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, he holds the ball. Patrick Mahomes holds the ball, but they just have this innate ability to stay away from the sacks and the strip fumbles and all those issues that Fields runs into. And then like, it's the consistency for Fields. He can show you he can make every throw, but then he has the easy one and he just doesn't hit it. And then they're off the field because they can't convert a third down. And I don't know at this point, like I don't have much hope for him as an NFL quarterback. I just know that if he gets on the field as a fantasy player, like it's 20 fantasy points per game. So I'm fine.
Right.
The thing I find frustrating about it is that like he has some serious flaws, and his flaws are like going to lead to back-breaking plays that lose you games.
Yeah.
Which is awful, and coaches hate that so much. But he also he'll win you games too. He's got that kind of upside with his legs and the ability to attack deep. And so it's like, yeah, like you're kind of stuck in purgatory if Justin Fields is your quarterback, but you're stuck in purgatory with a bunch of other guys too, like Derek Carr, right? Like you're winning the Super Bowl with Derek Carr. Like, no, you're not. And you know that, but like, he's not going to burn you in such like a horrible way. You know, it reminds me a little bit of like Jameis Winston or something. Or like Jameis Winston was fun and should have gotten a longer run, but you throw interceptions like that, it's going to get you benched.
He throws the ball into some places where like only defenders are.
No, exactly. Like he'll lose you games, but there's like the guys who win you games and lose you games. I like so much more than coaches.
But coaches don't like them.
Here's don't hypothetical.
Like. If you knew you had the best line in football and could be sure that you could protect a quarterback longer than any other offensive line in the NFL, would Fields then be how many quarterbacks would you take over Fields in that system? Do you think it's still a fatal flaw?
I don't know that Fields would even be that good in that situation. Because like I'm not sure if that's what I guess I don't know about Fields.
Well,
like does he need more time, or would he just take that time
and then still take that time? That's why I'm asking. Yeah.
I was like, is Ben like doing this thing where we're going to build the wall? I mean, I don't know what's happening here, but like the problem is like, the quarterbacks own their pressure rate too. It's not just how long they hold it. It's the way that they handle the pocket. Right. And, Fields, if you're drifting into pressure versus away from it. And I think that's the difference with the other guys we named. They have that innate ability to understand that and feel that or know that based on their pre-snap reads where they think the pressure's coming from. And for whatever reason, like Fields doesn't have that. So when he holds onto the ball, like the bad things happen. But I mean, offensive line matters, but we've also seen, over the years, like good quarterbacks overcome bad offensive line play. Yeah. I mean, it's never good. Like we don't want like pressure right in your lap, right up the middle, especially like no quarterback can handle that. But overall, the really good ones, like they can play around a bad offensive line and still make things happen. And so that's a challenge for Fields. Even with a good line, I think he would still have problems.
When you watch Fields and he's standing there and there's like a guy breaking loose, in his blind spot, and you're just like, he's still 3 steps away, but you're like, it's the love interest in Happy Gilmore when the slug bug is driving down the fairway and she's like, Happy, look out. And then the slug bug hits Happy Gilmore. Do you guys remember this?
I do.
It's like, Fields, look out. He got destroyed. Like 2 seconds later, like there's nothing you can do, but you're watching it and you just know that he's not getting the ball out. He's going to get absolutely crushed.
Yeah. Yeah. But this stuff has me still in on Fields. Even as he rises, I'm mixing him into 3 quarterback builds. Cause like, he's not like the market turns so much against him where like, it's like, oh, he's just Lance. Like, no, he is not just Lance. Like that's absurd. And it creates upside, but now the upside's getting sucked out a little bit because he's moving up in price. So I don't know.
I guess all over the place. I know the ADP is moving up. It's like I'll see him go like round 13 and then it'll be round 16 the next draft.
Yeah.
So
that's why you should never pay round 13, right? Like,
don't pay round 13.
Yeah.
I know you like Jalen Tolbert, Ben. Any thoughts on his rise?
They sat him. They sat him with Cooks and all those guys. Jalen Brooks made a really nice play on a deep shot, but everyone else was out, and they sat him. Dak keeps talking about how he spent a ton of time with him in the offseason. They're going to play him. I don't think he's like the perfect profile, but I also think this is an offense. We talked about it in the offseason, like behind Lamb is so bereft of actual target earning profiles. Like maybe Ferguson takes that year 3 leap, but was mostly routes based last year. Brandon Cooks really fell off in the target earning stuff last season. So there's a lot of opportunity for somebody to step in and actually have a strong secondary role behind Lamb. The fact that he did a lot of work with Dak over the offseason, all those things. It's one of those things where like a receiver, I'm typically not making situational bets, but he's really cheap. And he is rising, as you said, but he's still very cheap for a guy who
apparently Pete and Liam took him in the 12th today. That's too
12th
for me. I'm out. If he's in the 12th, I'm just fully out.
I want to see that. I want to know why that happened.
The 12th round and what? In a best
I assume BBM.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, there's legit like obviously anything after like round 11 is just a crapshoot at wide receiver. Yeah. So like you can make the case that he can. I wouldn't take him in the 12th, but you can make the case that if he hits in a way that could pay off. I want to see why they wound up taking him in the 12th. So that's wild.
Liam,
where are you at on him, Dwayne?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got the starting job. I mean, I live here in Dallas, so I mean, we hear about it all the time. I think he's probably got a shot to be 7. I think I've got him projected for like 70% route participation, which is how I do mine. I do route participation and then targets per route run. Those two things together is how I get to my target shares. So when I look at, Tolbert, I'm like you. I'm not crazy about his profile. Like, has not been a high target earner over the first 2 years, but he did come from a small school. So if you're going to give somebody, a little bit of an excuse like that sometimes can be one. And you pointed it out, like Brandon Cooks, like, no pun intended, I think is cooked. Like the last 2 years has been on a downward trajectory. I did some research on the man-based coverage stuff this offseason, and that was a pretty big, I don't want to say a big indicator, like for the things we use, when we say, oh, there was this high correlation or high R-squared value between, future fantasy production or just production period. A lot of these things are pretty low, but like it came way up for the guys that as they age. I wrote an article about it over at Fantasy Life if people want to check it out. It's free.
I like stuff like that where you can ask a question, like I have a specific question, like, is this guy cooked? And maybe it helps us answer that question.
Yeah. You said no pun intended, but that was kind of intended, right?
No, I feel like you have to say no pun intended. So yes, it was intended, but you have to say no pun intended. So like, I think it's to your point. I'm not huge on wide receivers as situational bets because we know it's such a talent driven position, but like once you get to the range where he's going, not the 12th round, but once you get to the range where he's typically going, and what's he up to now? What's he showing?
184.
Yeah. So where he's going right now,
it's fine.
Like, yeah, I mean, if you get like 2 weeks out of him, like he's probably like paying off his price.
Yeah.
I think he could really easily do that. He comes up with, 2 games where he goes 3 for 80 and a touchdown. Like he's probably paying that off. And
we know they're going to throw a ton. And look at their running back room. Look at their,
they can.
Let's look at the running back room. Because I'm taking a lot of Rico Dowdle, and he's a riser.
Me too.
I've just been kind of taking him over Zeke as like, I mean, in some cases I'll take Zeke, but it's like if I have Jonathan Brooks or if I'm like really hurting at running back of like, maybe I don't even have a running back 2 and I've got like a Breece Hall or something. I decided to really push it. Then like a Zeke becomes interesting, obviously, for touches. But Dowdle in most of the builds that I have, I'm like, I got James Conner. I got, I need upside. I have touch. Like the touches are so cheap this year. I'm entering that 130 range with touches already on the roster. I mean, the upside is pretty enticing to me. His talent profile is kind of like I'm like hoping he's Jerome Ford basically. If he's Chuba Hubbard, I feel like I'm winning everything. But I don't know. Thoughts on him? I mean, he did play in the preseason, but it wasn't like that long.
Just 6 snaps. Yeah, got the start.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm with you. Like Dowdle's been my preference, and also because of ADP, and like there's just been this gap between them. I think like if you had to choose today, Zeke probably is like the starter, even though the reports last week were that Dowdle's the face. I don't know, like those are kind of opinions, right? They're not necessarily like camp reports of, oh, he's getting much more work than Zeke. I feel like they're going to be pretty evenly split. We know that the Cowboys trust Zeke. And like one of the other things that I've studied a lot, like as much as we love efficiency and we know that we still want it in our running backs, like it's great tiebreakers. That's how you get guys like CMC, Bijan, Breece Hall, like these guys that can totally blow up fantasy. But coaches, like, I don't know that they care about it as much as we do. They just want guys out there on the field they feel like they can depend on, unless they've got a superstar that they know they can go to. And Zeke's probably going to check those boxes. So as much as I love Dowdle and I've been drafting him a ton, I'm really interested to see like how high he goes, like how much higher does he go? But I am with you. Like if I were to look up week 2 and be like, oh my God, one of these two guys is going to win you your league, I think we all know it's Dowdle. Dowdle suddenly surprises us. I don't think that's going to be Zeke. I think Zeke will be the guy that, to your point, Pat, you're like, okay, it's fine. I'm getting 12 fantasy points per week,
which I really need.
I didn't take him, until round 12 of a draft or round 11 of a draft. Like, so I feel like
that's
going to be
get
the narrative
12 fantasy points per week.
Probably not, but you'll get
touchdowns if he scores touchdowns. Like if Zeke, that's Zeke's
you'll get
out
weeks
to like,
of 12 fantasy points is maybe the better.
Yeah.
Maybe not every week, but you'll get weeks of 12 fantasy points. And if you structure a build where like 10 of those are really helpful, then I think it's worth
What do you
something.
think, Dwayne?
Touchdowns are
Dallas,
out though to a ceiling,
for sure.
year.
And
Suddenly
dump
gave
off
him all
passes.
the work inside the 5.
Sure. He was a
like,
PPR scam last year. Like they were feeding him.
And hey, to your point though, like Ben, like I do think, and I've talked about this, I've written about this. I think the Dallas running backs could be sneaky in the passing game this year, because if Cooks can't earn targets, right? If he can't go out and do his part, if Jalen Tolbert really is just kind of who he's already been, and then even if Ferguson takes a little step forward with him and CD, like they're still going to have to get the ball to someone. And we see this all the time. These swing pass backs, they're not really guys you can integrate into like a first or a second read kind of passing game. But, everybody's covered. Dak doesn't run as much as he used to. Like a lot of those things turn into checkdowns. And
what do you think is the probability being in Dallas that they actually bring somebody in after these cuts happen? Because I
think it's pretty high.
I think it's kind of high, man. I think Dowdle's going to be the RB3 week 1 is what we're going to find out.
It could play very well could be. Yeah. That's why I'm interested to see how high Dowdle goes, because at some point I would be out. Like I wrote about
you're thinking who comes in though? P. Ryan?
Yeah, maybe P. Ryan.
Ooh, yeah.
It's not great, but I don't know who the answer to that question is. It's a tough one.
Me, the Royce Freeman stuff, which people kind of freaked out about.
I'm not freaking out about Royce Freeman.
I'm not either, but I actually like it. I want Stephen Jones to think he's got the best RB3 in football.
For real. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like that's great for me if I'm drafting Rico.
That is a good point.
Don't sign anyone. You guys already got Royce Freeman. Like people are idiots for letting you have him. Kidding me? This one you somebody P. Ryan. What's the point? To your point on efficiency, Dwayne, one thing I think coaches do care about is consistency and success rate. I like NFL Next Gen's ROE percentage for this. Zeke was at a 42% success rate last year, which is good. Like he was like among, like the top 15.
Yeah,
guys.
like he can't run anymore, but he's got like the 34-year-old Frank Gore thing where like he's got no athleticism anymore, but still has what he always had, which is an ability to read holes and get like small through the.
He has great
tackles.
vision.
Yeah, I mean he's got running back skills, and it's like I don't want to draft Zeke, but I do have to admit that. Like
he was RB12 in that behind Khalil Herbert. He was right in front of Zach Moss. Like he was right.
It's funny, is like ROE and all these things are not sticky year over year, but coaches do care about.
They care about
things.
it.
Like
funny
that stuff. A lot of the ROE stuff really comes down to your freaking offensive line. Like I mean, and like how many defenders were in the box. Like that's such a huge driver. Which is Zeke's pretty good. Like with a lot of defenders in the box. Like he's not going to break a long run, but he's not going to lose you yards. And like you said, Ben, he still knows how to just kind of get skinny in the hole and still have power like right at the point of contact. And if you need 2 yards, like he can get it. And so, coaches like that.
Yeah, like Latavius Murray looked fine doing that last year and now isn't going to play football this year, right? Like there's these aging backs that are good at that exact thing, being a downhill runner. And Zeke's obviously that. Pat, some other names. I saw somebody mention Elijah Mitchell. Like if the 49ers wanted to move on from him now that they got all this Jordan Mason stuff who's on this list.
That's it.
Kendre Miller, everyone thinks is going to get cut.
Oh, like, give me Rico. I'll take Rico over Kendre all day, every day. This guy, here's the thing, because Rico's established himself over the course of a training camp, is splitting reps with the ones, and Kendre got himself booted out of New Orleans. I'm just like, I don't, so much of it comes down to the coaches trusting these guys, and Kendre is like an ultimate untrustworthy dude, apparently.
On the coach that doesn't want to trust anyone.
Third round pick.
Yeah.
Has Dennis Allen ever given a positive compliment to anyone?
To Taysom Hill. He loves Taysom Hill as much as anyone loves anyone.
Pat, you skipped past Rashee Rice. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that. He played 100% of the snaps with Mahomes. I'm probably stealing this straight from your article, Dwayne, but I saw that he played 100%, and then Xavier was in there a lot, but I think the specific number was 75% from your article. I didn't track the exact numbers on those two, but to me, that was like really bullish. That they have a lot of receivers, and they didn't mess around with like the Mecole or the Sky Moore stuff. Those guys played with Carson Wentz after, and they went with the guys that we've been drafting. Rice has been kind of just trickling back up after he fell way down. But I also saw ETR mention the other day that they moved him down to a 1-game suspension, even though I think it was Levitan mentioned like this isn't even technically possible, but we're like adjusting down the possibility that he may not even get suspended this year. I think Rice, because the price fell so much and then it rose and then everyone's anchored to the old price, he just continues. He's probably been on this list every week for you guys, right? He's just continually rising 4 spots, but like is probably still multiple rounds undervalued at this point if he's actually going to play 100% of the snaps with Patrick Mahomes.
If he wasn't getting suspended, we get the news. The case, they set a date for the case. It's February 2025. 0% chance he's going to be suspended. Where are you guys taking Rashee Rice?
I feel like he's like a third rounder.
Yeah, I think he'd be back to the 2-3 turn like he was early in the offseason. I do think there's some risk with him at that spot because so much of his stuff is scheme based.
Yeah,
design.
And that was pre-worthy. That's pre-worthy.
But the worthy stuff is
Brown,
like,
even though he's hurt, like he's going to be back.
That sounds like it's going to open up what they're like. They want to put the vertical element back on film, but the defenses want to stop that. And then Rashee Rice just catches 9 million passes underneath.
He's just standing right here. I'm right here whenever you need me. 10 times a game.
Running curls.
I guess the question though is, do they continue to give him all of that? Because Xavier Worthy's really good with the ball in his hands at the line of scrimmage too. Like at Texas, 25% of his targets came, within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. He can do other things. He can obviously get deep. We've seen all that stuff in training camp. But I mean, there are other playmakers that you can also get the ball around the line of scrimmage. So like that would be my biggest concern, is so many things were schemed for Rashee Rice. I don't want to overthink it though. I mean, I just want to look at a player that was really good in year one. And like you said, Ben, he plays with freaking Patrick Mahomes. So I would be back in on him as an early round 3 pick. Like, okay, you have to pick, Ben. You're on the clock. We know that Rashee Rice is not suspended, which Drew Davenport's a great follow. If you guys don't follow him for legal stuff on Twitter, he basically thinks this thing's getting kicked down the road. Like they're going to kick the can down the road on it. Rice probably playing every game this year. If you knew that, Malik Neighbors or Rashee Rice?
Oh my God. I'm probably taking Neighbors, but
I'm taking Neighbors too.
Because I think you're right about
close,
being
though,
a little
right?
bit of risk. It's close. That's the spot. You're right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the tier.
He's right there with Neighbors. Right.
What about DK Metcalf? You guys taking him over DK Metcalf?
I would take Rice. I thought he was going to do someone like Metcalf, and I think I would have been comfortable saying Rice. Neighbors is where he really twisted my arm.
Devonta Smith's right there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a close one. Like I'm
super
cool.
Dude, he had like a Eagles 2.4 yards per route run with Patrick Mahomes as a rookie, and he played 100% of the snaps in this preseason game.
And I've been on the don't overthink this train with Rice too, because people love to talk about the ADOT and the schemed usage. He got used on a bunch of screens, but he also earned targets. And I'm actually like, I go the other way with that. Like people, I did a whole rant like 5 ADP chasings ago. I was like, check who else got a lot of screens. Like seriously, like if you're gonna tell me about screens, check who else got them, because it's a lot of number 1 wide receivers.
The good players.
It's the good players get used on screens. It's a good
thing.
Yeah,
but that's kind of the other point. Is now you add all these other weapons that
can do.
They
it.
may want to get them some of those.
Worthy could get some of those.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
Like that's the beauty of Deebo. He's getting all those. They just let Aiyuk be the man beater. Right. And so when you play the man, you get the man heavy looks, it's backside play. They're going to Aiyuk. I mean, Brock Purdy is essentially playing Madden out there. He's dropping back. Oh, it's zone Deebo. Oh, it's man Aiyuk. Like, I mean, or Kittle, Kittle can destroy any linebacker or safety pretty much in coverage. So I think that's the one, small concern. And like, I wasn't huge on Rashee Rice coming out. Now, like when I look at players like over 2 years, his coming in rookie profile, then after year 1, you put those two things together, it's still really positive. But like, I can kind of squint and be like, okay, like I could see a path to where he's not maybe he turns out to be more like a Juju. I don't want to not to put bad Juju on him. That was a pun intended.
But also, like when you look at guys that have the questionable profiles, it's kind of like why. And for him, it was mostly all of it. Well, small school, and the biggest production year was his final year. But that year was a 96 catch year, right? Like at a college level in 12 games, like a really high volume type thing, which he did immediately. So as far as like the questionable profile thing, I'm with you on that too, but I've thought it through. Like the parts of his questionable profile are, I don't know how to frame that, but are at least a little bit enticing. That the what he did do as a senior was the 96 catch, like a really high volume. Like I feel like he could just have so many receptions.
What's funny? I thought he'd like, if he was to make it in the NFL, I would have told you he was going to be like a possession receiver. Like he was really good at like even though he would kind of get open late, you know what I mean? And even though he was covered, like he wasn't really covered in college. Like there was a lot of real tight coverage stuff where he would catch the ball. But really the way he comes out and wins in year one is like as this yak monster, which I really honestly, didn't expect at all. But like, that's the beauty of Andy Reid.
Yeah, that adds a huge element. But I mean, this is an offense that has been first in the NFL in pass rate over expected. That's the other thing we don't want to overthink. It's not just the Mahomes factor, but the pass volume, right? Like I think he could catch like 8 balls a game, and you're like, okay, this is really good.
I like this.
I like a lot of receptions. Even if Worthy's getting stuff, even if other guys are getting stuff.
That's why I asked the neighbors thing. Like 7 targets, even like if his targets went down, like how many targets do you have to get from Daniel Jones to be worth the same number of targets from Patrick Mahomes?
Right.
Like 6 targets from Mahomes is probably worth 8 or 9 from Daniel Jones. Yeah. Like something like that. That's I probably overstated. Probably 7.5. Like 7.5 versus 6 is probably like about where it's at.
I think I'd take the 6 Mahomes targets there versus 7.5 Jones. Yeah, give me the 6 Mahomes targets.
God, you're making a Rice over Neighbors case.
Sorry. This is what my brain does to me. These are the things I wake up thinking about. Like on Seinfeld, he jots down a joke that he can't read. I jot down some stupid thing. I have no clue.
Just wake up to Rice over Neighbors ?
Yeah. I'm like, what was I thinking? I don't even know what happened.
I would say the takeaway of this is draft Rice while it's still in the 5th.
Oh man, yeah.
Yes.
Dude, have you guys gone back and it's a fun thing to do. I went back like a week ago and just looked at all those teams. Like I had one team where I got Mahomes, Kelsey, I got Rice in like the 80s.
Man. I have a team with Mahomes, Kelsey, and Worthy, and I took Worthy over Rice at the time. Like, because that's where I got Worthy in the 6th, and I took him over Rice, where now, you wish you could sub in Rice, but I mean, he at one point, like I think I probably thought Rice might come back to me in the 7th, because at the time that was not unusual. I need to go back and look at my Rice teams. I had at one point like 27%. I
was over 30% because I do all the slows in batches, and I was doing all the slows when he was going in the 7th, and I took him in the 7th a fuck ton.
Every time.
Those teams are amazing.
Yeah.
But now I'm down to like 24% because the next batch I was like, well, he's going in the 5th now, and I already have 30+%. So, but I don't love.
I don't want to chase him up, and then now you're like,
that's kind of how I need to just take him again.
I just want to keep taking him. Yeah.
What about Chase Brown? You guys chasing him up? He's at 102, but I think this probably doesn't even reflect.
Man,
like he's kind of moving to the 8-9 turn, really.
I was getting number one. I liked Chase Brown to start. And then like some smart people in the industry were kind of like, I'm not so sure about Chase Brown. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll let him fall down. So I stopped drafting him. I wish that I had kept on drafting him, because now he's getting pushed up to the point where I just wrote about him like last week, and like he's risen another round like since then. And I was recommending him. And now I watched this game, and there's a lot of concerns. Like, I mean, he's missing wide open holes. Like I know Zach Moss was sick technically, so that's why he didn't, play in the game. I think Chase Brown is the more explosive of the two players, but I worry, he's like, could he be like the Justin Fields of running back? Could he be the DeAndre Swift? Like did this all the time. Remember when Deuce Staley would just like be so pissed at DeAndre Swift because he wouldn't just go to the hole like they wanted. He wanted to bounce everything outside. And we're seeing that with Chase. Like he did that last year, and I kind of dismissed. I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to overreact. Like the sample's too small to like freak out. He had, high volume in college, all those things at the end of his career. So I was fine. But then like the things that we were worried about earlier in the offseason, like that, he did those things this weekend. Like he did the same things again. And so now I'm like, I still love the upside. I love the offense. I love the explosive playmaking ability, but like, is he going to be one of these guys that does the things that frustrates the coaches and keeps him off the field? I do worry about that.
I love that they're like, this is like the first FUD I've heard about him. I love that there's like a little bit of concern in what you're saying, because I've been trying to like actually, steelman this and test it a little bit. And I think those are very fair points. I hadn't really heard that take on him, not necessarily hitting the holes he needs to hit and stuff. The thing I keep coming back to is how Illinois actually like did use him as a workhorse at times.
Yeah.
People think he's like the scat back, but if Moss is injured or out, and obviously Moss was just sick, but that's sort of what I took away from the usage this weekend. Was like, it looked like Brown was the only dude, right? Then they went to Travion Williams or whoever later, but it's like, man, he could consolidate. He could be a workhorse in the way that we want our, handcuffs or zero RB targets in this range. But he's getting pricey for sure, man. He's another one, right? I'm glad I did take some of him because
I moved him up last week up to buy Jonathan Brooks, like, because I've kind of been stubborn on Jonathan Brooks about not moving him down with ADP, but I've got him. I moved him up right into that range with Brooks and Jalen Warren. And so now watching this film this weekend,
I don't know why Jalen Warren's in that range, but
I know. I'm sorry.
Jalen Warren was
in the 50s, so you moved him into the 50s then?
Yeah, no, it's second round, Pat. Did I give him the second round? He's my Jalen Tolbert to Pete.
Yeah. That's kind of where I have him. He comes out at like 94 in our ranks, I think.
Yeah, I'm right around there.
Yeah. So he's
I don't know if I can go further, is my point. Like, how much further can I go? Maybe I can. I do really love the offense. So
yeah, and I definitely I had some of those concerns. I played it similarly to you, where I was like, I just wasn't taking him enough. I was at like 10% on him when he was in that 120s range. Where,
yeah, he was really falling. I'm so pissed at myself for that.
I know. I'm pissed at myself too. But I've been trying to, to me, there's not that much of a opportunity cost to grab him. It's like he's in a group of guys that we also have kind of lukewarm feelings about. So while he's still in that lukewarm zone, I've just been prioritizing him to try to get
a flat spot like the neighbors thing. So I just kept like, well, okay, over him. Yes, over him. Yes, over him. Yes, over him.
Exactly. So that's where I'm like, all right, let me load up now, because if he does start to challenge, Zamir White has been kind of like I'm like, this guy's definitely the starter. And I know it's a worse offense, but like I get the certainty there. Once he moves up into that kind of range, like Jonathan Brooks, I'm taking Jonathan Brooks over Chase Brown. So if he starts to like hit that kind of level of back, then I'll be out at that point. But I've been trying to be aggressive while he's still a little bit behind those guys.
The chat just asked Tennessee backs versus Cincinnati backs, and they've been going higher. And I've been basically all off season being like, I think Cincinnati's offense is going to be way better. I was concerned about Tennessee, but I actually left that Tennessee game a little bit more into their backs. They got 10 touches combined across 14 plays on the 2 first team drives.
Lots of targets.
A lot of targets. I think they caught like 3 balls on those 10 touches and then 7 carries. Spears didn't play quite as much as Pollard. I thought Pollard actually looked a little bit like that. You were like, is the burst back after last year? And like a little bit like the old player that he used to be. Like, I've been pretty out on Pollard. I moved him up quite a bit back to where like he goes, because I've been below. But that was one where I left that game with a pretty big takeaway from this weekend, where I was like, man, I don't think Will Levis is good. I didn't think he looked very comfortable reading out stuff downfield. But the stuff about Brian Callahan's going to like have him throw to the running backs looked very clear to me. I was like, okay, well, maybe I do need to be on the running backs more. So anyway.
Spears, didn't have as many yards as Pollard, but like if you watch it, like he was getting blown up in the backfield. There were defenders back there every play. And man, the touchdown he scored inside the 5 was great. Sweet cutback, man. Like just a beautiful cutback. So yeah, I'm with you. I like both players. I could see this stuff flip-flopping every week. I mean, this is one of those that we talked about at the beginning. Like, hey, we see the tip of the iceberg, but how much of the tip of the iceberg like matches to all the other things that are sub-level to, under the water that we've heard. Like the coaches have already told us all offseason, like they spent the money on Pollard. They said they wanted guys that were interchangeable, that they wanted to be able to do both things. And then we've heard those things in camp, that's how they're getting used. And then now we see it in the first preseason game. They do that exact same thing. Like you mentioned, Pollard a little bit ahead, 57% of the snaps versus 43% for Spears. Pollard had 50% of the design rushing attempts, 38% for Spears, but Spears was slightly ahead in the passing game. 50% route participation with the starters versus 33% for Pollard. But I could see all of those same facets just flipping the next week, right? And it being actually Pollard that got a little more time on passing downs. I think a lot of this one could come down to which drives were you on the field? You know?
Yep.
Mhm.
And then now they did interchange them during the drives too. So it wasn't just, oh, Pollard got a drive and then Spears got a drive. But I like both of these players at cost. And I've been drafting both of them, like, because even though I liked Spears because he was cheaper, like they were close enough, like in profiles, I was like, well, I want to be drafting both of them. So when I can get Pollard, I want to take him. When I get Spears, because I have trouble, like sometimes people are like, oh, why take Pollard when I can just get Spears? Which I understand.
That's what I was doing.
Because they're often available at the same pick is why. Like you're like,
well, now they are.
Yeah.
But they weren't like, 2 weeks ago. Now, like
back then I was like, well, I think Spears is a better talent profile too. Pollard's shown some efficiency decline, but I do think that was a mistake. I like what you're saying.
It can be a trap. Like I've done it before too with different, not these two players, but I've done it, in the past. It's the same thing that people do right now with Jaden Reed, right? Versus, oh, I can wait and get Christian Watson or Dontavian Wicks, or Dobbs.
Right. Yeah, I actually wish I had a little more
right
Spears.
sometimes. The more expensive player can be right sometimes.
Yeah. I mean,
especially when they're all good.
Yeah.
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 The concern with Pollard was like, maybe he's not good anymore, but that was a big one for me watching him. I was like, okay, he doesn't look bad. I mean, like, cause he is 28 now, 27, 28 and had the efficiency decline last year. And you're like, yeah, this can be a little tricky.
I feel like it was probably some of the tightrope stuff, but it's hard to say.
Right.
He did have burst on that one play. Now it was a wide open hole, his long run. He eventually got chased down and tackled from behind. He kind of went down weird. I was like, oh no, like don't like have that injury again. Cause that's how he got the tightrope injury. Was that tackle from behind. But I still honestly, between the two, thought, even though Spears was getting bottled up because of the other team, looked like he still probably has the most juice.
Yeah, I should clarify. I was way behind on Pollard, but still drafting Spears. Like I had Spears ranked way ahead of him, and I just left that game like I want to be in on both these guys a little bit. And if like Chase Brown gets so expensive you can't get him, I now think those guys are a good fallback. And I was somebody who was out on that prior to this preseason week 1.
Have you guys been, sorry, back to the Bengals, have you guys been drafting Zach Moss as he's falling any, or you're just like,
I think I've drafted him like once or twice since the fall, but I think he needs to fall a little bit further. Like if he's, I mean, we had it as Brown was available in like the 120s and Moss was kind of going where Brown is now, I guess a little higher, but I'm like, not that he needs to fall to the 120s, but he's at like 102. I'd like him to fall at least closer to 110, I think.
The challenge is if Brown like craps the bed by some chance,
there's upside.
I do think like,
I
do think that Moss could basically be Mixon.
Right.
Do you
do you like Najee over Moss? Would you take Pollard over Moss? Where would he fit with those two guys?
Man,
Najee's way over Moss. I mean, Najee
by ADP, but like in your actual like.
No, I have Najee rated ADP. As much as I like Warren, I think Najee's totally fine. I think they're gonna just run the ball a ton.
Sure.
Yeah, I think they're going to run the ball plenty, but I just feel so much more bullish about the Bengals offense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of would rather draft Moss than Najee.
That's kind of where I've been, but
yeah,
I haven't taken a lot of Najee because I just never can click on him over Jalen Warren.
Well, that's what I do. I just click
like
Warren. I have Najee.
Especially, it's like every time I have an excuse too. It's like, well, I don't have this build yet with Jalen Warren. I can't take Najee Harris, even though I've got like Jalen's my second most.
Last thing I'd want is this build to be right, and I have Najee instead of Warren.
Exactly. That's the sick shit, I think.
When I have Warren lined up and he gets sniped and Najee's still there, I do make a point to take him.
Just do it. Yeah.
Just do it. Yeah. I'm at the 4% Najee. Have him ranked at ADP, but I don't really draft him that much. But. Yeah.
You got the comfort.
I got the blanket. I got the blanket. Perfect guy to have an exposure blanket on, I think. I want to ask, so Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell looks like we're getting maybe a flip of the RB2, but Mason is a guy who hasn't really been drafted, and kind of curious to get your thoughts, Dwain, on any of the guys, whether it's Mason or anyone else that you're drafting now that haven't really been drafted at 100% clip so far. So potential leverage guys that we have access to in August that people in May didn't know to draft.
Well, man, RIP Trey Sermon. That was one. I guess we'll see. This was still early in the preseason. It's funny, we act like these guys are completely dead. They've got an injury and we've got plenty of time.
That was rough, man. I've been taking
that was rough
Sermon too. That was rough.
And the problem with Sermon is like I just don't believe in him at all. So like if he like stubbed his pinky toe, I'd be like, oh,
it's over.
Sorry, man.
I had to like work the talk Siegel into him in our Pros versus Joes draft, and he was our 20th round pick. And I was like, no, this is the right running back pick here, Sean. We took him in the 20th round, and now he's just going to be a complete zero because of injury. I'm like, damn it.
Yep.
Well, I do think Elijah Mitchell like is an interesting one. You know, I don't know why Kyle Shanahan continues to like just burn, you know, mid-round picks on running backs when he can find these guys as well as he does. His dad did the same thing though, so it's like apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I'm like, don't you guys remember Olandis, Gary, and Mike Anderson?
Yeah,
no one listening to this show knows who those people are. But
there's so many. Who is that really skinny Broncos running back that we got excited about? He was like 180 pounds. I'll look it up. There's some hilarious.
Well, back in the day, we had Tatum Bell.
No.
So they have two profiles. They have two
way
archetypes that they like. Like one of my first articles ever in fantasy, and then I just didn't write again for a while because like I was in a different career and professionally I just got super busy. But it was called S2K, so Shanahan or SK2, so Shanahan Kubiak, right? It was all about their scheme and the running backs, the type of running backs they pick, and it's like these guys that a lot of people consider plotters, but they have great vision, right? Like Arian Foster. But the funny part is they don't even know when they have a good one or not. Like they just draft a bunch of them and they eventually find one. So like Arian Foster was like the example, you know, of where it worked. Yeah. Like Charkandrick West is the example of like, you know, when it didn't work out. Lorenzo Taliaferro was an example of like when it didn't work out. So
Ruben Drones was a fullback, and then they made him into a lead back.
Yeah,
but then they also had this other archetype that they wanted, like the true explosive player, the Elijah Mitchell, the Tatum Bell, the Clinton Portis. Clinton Portis was the best example of like that, like really working out. Achane is the example of what that looks like, you know, with Mike McDaniel. So they have these two archetypes that they want to have, and whenever you look, you know, at Elijah Mitchell, like he's obviously the explosive one, but whenever we look at Jordan Mason, like he's the guy that like he's not super fast, but man, like patient runner, sees the field really well. He's not like super powerful, but has enough powerful to like run through arm wraps and tackles. He can bounce off. He's got good contact. So he's one of these guys that like if he did ever find himself like getting 60% of the workload somehow in the 49ers offense, like he would be a running back one. Like I don't have any doubt about that at this point about Jordan Mason. The challenge is like, you know, would it ever, you know, come to that? Because eventually Elijah Mitchell will be healthy. Like assuming the 49ers don't cut him, and then it's probably a split, you know, between those guys. But I have mixed in Jordan Mason a little bit because Elijah Mitchell is always hurt. And I've kind of chilled out on Mitchell. I was taking him quite a bit, like in the last 2 rounds, especially like when I had Detroit guys and things like that, where it just kind of led me to doing it some. But I have been mixing in Jordan Mason in the very last round.
Pat, was it Selvin Young?
No, it wasn't Sylvan Young. It was like
Sylvan Young wasn't. Yeah,
it was this dude. He was like so skinny, like it was absurd.
Yeah, Young was a little bigger back for sure.
Yeah,
Hayden Bell's was pretty small, right? No,
how big was no? Slayton was bigger than that. He was under Kubiak in Houston. 180. How big how big was Tatum Bell? I don't know who the 100.
Apparently he was.
Oh, was it the running back from Oklahoma, Quentin Griffin?
No,
he was Deuce Vaughn basically before Deuce Vaughn. You guys go look at.
Let me
see
like
the 5'7". I don't.
Cecil Sapp. I'm like,
no, it wasn't O'Shea Moreno.
He's a bigger dude. Yeah.
People are saying Tatum Bell.
I don't know. You guys do
Tatum Bell feels like
we just all look up weights,
right?
What Mike Anderson? No, Mike
213 Tatum Bell. Jesus.
Yeah, it wasn't Tatum Bell.
He was bigger than I thought he was.
It was
I
like
didn't think
this
Tatum Bell was that big.
Yeah, it was, and you know what the funny thing is? It's probably not even a Shanahan back. It was probably post the Shanahan years. But maybe it was under Kubiak or something after they. I'm gonna find this dude. All right, set you guys up with a topic, and then I'll figure out who this Broncos back was.
Trump candidate doesn't even play for these teams, but that's
Mitchell Griffin was 5'7", 194. That's the closest thing I found.
That's a good one.
Legette's an interesting one. As like, this has been a bad run out for Legette, but like, he's not getting cut. Like, he's not a practice squad candidate.
Pat, is it Ronnie Hillman? Ronnie Hillman.
Yes, it was Ronnie Hillman.
Ronnie Hillman.
Yeah. Ronnie Hillman. That dude was tiny.
It.
Yeah.
Chat did it.
Thank you, chat. Ronnie Hillman. Yeah, let's pull him up. So he was from San Diego State. Yeah. That's who it was. And I don't think really ever did anything. But I was like, Ronnie Hillman, dude. This guy's going to crush.
But back in the day, I remember drafting some Ronnie Hillman way too damn early. I'll tell you that.
3rd round pick in 2012. He's 200, so not quite.
I remember when Tatum Bell was on the cover of Fantasy Football Index. And it was like the next great. I was like, that's bold for a magazine, like way back in the day.
I used to read that magazine way back in the day too, man.
Me too, man. Me too.
They had Steve Slayton. You mentioned him. They had him like RB4 one year, and I was like,
he had that amazing rookie year.
Because I was like, these guys are crazy, man. They love Steve Slayton. This is way too much.
I drafted too much Steve Slayton that year because I had drafted him the year before as just a late round dart, and he like won fantasy championships.
So,
yeah.
And then he was awful the next year.
So
brutal.
Yeah, he was terrible. West Virginia, Steve Slayton.
Yeah. What were you going to say about Legette, Pat?
Well, I just feel like this is kind of the time to buy Legette. Like everybody's out. He's actually getting back to practice now. It's been a bad offseason for sure, and he'll probably bust. But he's getting so cheap, and we're actually losing rookies that we were hopeful about that didn't have draft capital, and now he's like falling into that range.
Mingo also didn't look good this weekend.
So Mingo
was doing normal Mingo things. So
not surprising, but it is nice to see. So I don't know. I think Legette is suddenly becoming pretty interesting, and maybe we grab the low point of his value potentially.
I've been taking him as he's fallen.
Nice.
Just I totally hear your narrative, but like once I get into that range and I look at the other names, like I'm like, okay, well they still invested a 1st round pick, in the guy. I don't love his profile. He doesn't grade out great, but it's kind of like what you talked about, the last year for Rashee Rice, even though he's an older prospect, it was a great last year and it was in the SEC. So like, I mean, there is something like that I can get on board with Legette. And Adam Thielen's aging. Jonathan Mingo did not look good again,
got a throw to him open in the middle of the field. It hit him right in the chest and dropped it. It's like, all right, well, there's your Jonathan Mingo camp bus.
I didn't have a chance to see that. When he jumped up to catch it, did he just start spinning around in circles like a helicopter?
And then fly out down?
flying around the field?
He did some weird Madden animation where he just gets stuck. No.
Yeah, he's a glitch, man. He's a human glitch.
This is weird stuff. Remember that catch last year, Dwayne? We had a lot of fun on ship chasing where he was near the sideline and he jumped like
oh my god,
feet to get out of bounds. It's like he was trying so hard to get his feet out of bounds. Like you had to try.
I do remember. I remember thinking, how was that even possible?
Yeah, it's impressive. It's so impressive that it is hard to be that backwards from what you want to do. This is playing best ball, Dwaylian. He will probably bust, but you should draft him. That's called a pick outside the top 150 in best ball. We need to get these guys, who have some upside, but it's probably not going to work. And I think at this price, like, for a while I was like him versus Jalen Polk. I was like, I'm taking Jalen Polk. This guy's got a clear runway to, getting out there, and Legette's had the clear runway, but now the runway, it's a little iced over.
What about Legette versus Jalen McMillan, who's the big riser? That's where I have him. I have those guys ranked next to each other.
That's a really interesting comp because I don't have a ton of pushback for why you wouldn't take McMillan. He's had such a strong camp. Right. I guess the reason to take Legette is to bet that he can emerge as like the clear number 2 target down the stretch. Yeah. And really it's a bet on draft capital and athleticism.
Yeah.
McMillan,
I just Legette before I asked that back ahead of McMillan. I had McMillan ahead of him for a moment, but I haven't I just have McMillan ranked aggressively. I have them both ahead of Brandon Cooks. That's how aggressively I'm ranking these guys compared to veterans.
Yeah.
This weekend, McMillan, the other nice thing, he was playing outside. So we didn't have Evans and Godwin obviously in the game. It was McMillan and Trey Palmer. They were the 2 guys that started for the Bucs. But McMillan, he played mostly slot. Well, this, like, then you can wax poetic here on McMillan. You're the dude for that. But he has been playing outside. We've heard that, some in camp that they've been, moving him all over the formation. So he did that in this game. Like his first target he earned right out of the gate was from outside, it was a dig route on, here where he's cutting in across, the defender. So if something did happen, with Godwin, we already expect him to probably be the lead slot receiver, but even now, maybe, that's probably a good thing for him in 11 personnel. maybe he really is the guy that's going to start on the outside. I think it's kind of tricky because Palmer like is the guy that gives you that vertical threat, but really you're using Evans in that way too. So I do like McMillan. I'm still taking Legette over him, but I really like it.
The one thing that I've said through the offseason and was really on display here with this couple catches is you'll never see a wide receiver go down quicker at first contact. So don't expect him to start breaking tackles down the field. If you see his 2 catches, go watch his preseason highlights. It's like he doesn't even really try to gain more.
Hey man, we need week 17. That's months away. So stay healthy, Jalen. Stay healthy.
He'll get open and catch passes, but yeah, I mean, it's just he's not gonna be a big yak guy.
Can I do something selfish? I got to bounce in a minute, but I wanted to get your thoughts on Polk. He didn't start this weekend. I'm not that worried about that. He was still on the field right away after, especially when you consider who started the game, right? I mean, we've got guys that we know shouldn't be on a football field, like Tyquan Thornton, like they just shouldn't be out there. KJ Osborne, not worried about it. Like I think Polk's a starter week 1, but let me hear your thoughts on Polk because I've drafted a ton of him, so I really love him.
Me because of the UW stuff? Are you asking Pat?
Yeah. You know more about him than anybody.
So the way that I've described it is I liked Polk way more than McMillan as a fan, and then you really dig in the numbers, you dig into some of the target earning, and to me he's that type of receiver that the film guys are going to really like because he does everything you want. I think he's better for an NFL team. I understand why the Patriots took him higher than McMillan. But McMillan, I think, has the higher ceiling because McMillan just like had the higher targets per out run, had the 1,000-yard season alongside the Dunze because he gets open and he makes the plays without necessarily like he makes things like makes easy plays, whereas Polk is like fairly inconsistent at times. So the way I described it is like for fantasy, I care more about the worst 20% of your routes than the best 20% of your routes, which is kind of weird, right? But like we obviously want the like really strong target shares. And that's the part of Polk's game that's a little bit of a concern. He wasn't hyper reliable in some spots. Dude made so many big plays. He's such a good contested catch guy. I understand why people like him, and he's going to go win the ball in spots that is like, again, good for an NFL team. I worry about his ability to like consistently win targets over the whole sample of all of his routes, which I think is just such an important thing at receiver. So I'm a little bit behind, certainly behind Pat, and a little bit behind, I think, most people on him and on his profile, especially in an offense that projects for the fewest points of any, with the look ahead lines of any offense in the NFL. You're like, it's kind of a tricky pass game. But if May hits, Pat, you've made this point a bunch of times. If May hits, then it's it's a systemic thing for the whole Patriots offense.
Yeah, Pat, I hate Ben's answer so can I hear your answer?
Yeah. So one of the leaks for me, I think, in Dynasty, because I got really obsessed with fantasy through Dynasty, and I think like as I look at how then to apply Dynasty to best ball, I feel like one of the things I've had to get better at is like there are those guys in Dynasty who you're like, I just don't think this dude's ever going to be like a huge number one. Elite. And you need that ceiling in Dynasty. Like you want a guy who can be like a team's true number one, huge, massive hit. And I'm really searching for those profiles. And I'm like, I don't really care if you're going to be like a solid number 2 for a while.
Yeah.
And that's really where
That's where Polk is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he is. But like, I think he very much profiles as a guy who can hit the ground running. Like when you hear about like all of his traits and everything, it's like he does stuff, the contested catch, he can play over the middle, he can line up all over the place. He's got great hands. The route running's pretty good. So I'm like, this dude can get out there and earn targets right away. And then he's in probably the best situation in the NFL for being able to do that. And then he's priced as a second round pick, well below a lot of other
second rounders. Yeah.
So to me, like him and honestly, AD Mitchell is becoming a bigger priority too. Cause I'm getting that, I'm getting the discount relative to some of the other draft capital. And it's a profile that I really like. And it's a spot where we're seeing evidence that this guy's going to be involved early, where we're getting evidence that a lot of other guys aren't going to be involved early. The price hasn't really shot up on Polk. I've been hammering him the entire way, in part because I'm drafting a ton of Drake May.
What's funny is like you're both kind of saying the same thing too, and that's what showed up like when I put the prospects through the rookie supermodel. Supermodel's a joke, guys. Like, so for people that wonder, like, why do you call it super? Is Ian Hardens and I were joking one day, and we were like, oh, let's call it a supermodel, whatever. So, but when we put it like through the process, like of going through the model, like he graded out as being competent in a lot of areas, but not great, to your point, Ben, and to what you were just saying, Pat, in any of them. So it's like that wide receiver 1 upside's probably not there for him.
Yeah.
But like he could be a wide receiver 2, and he's in an offense where I look around, I'm like, Jesus, like they have no one. There's no one to throw
I
the
do
ball
think he's
to
a good football
on this
player.
team.
So, like, I mean, I think it's the way Pat put it. I completely agree with. Before we let you go, Dwayne, because I know you got to get going, I really wanted to ask you if you had any insight on Kimani Vidal not playing this weekend. I know like Harbaugh's been really tight-lipped, but that was one I really wanted to get your thoughts on. What do you think about that?
Man, I haven't been able to search anything new this morning because I've been busy. But
there's been some depth chart projections that he was left off of.
Oh, I saw that. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I saw that thing from the Athletic saying
it does not seem bullish.
Oh no, that's
saying that he might not make the roster. Yeah. I couldn't find anything because I searched everywhere for like 10 minutes. Like it took too much of my time when I had so much to do yesterday, and I'm searching everywhere. Why did Kimani Vidal? Because the word was like he suited up for warmups, but then like he didn't play, and they did the same thing, with McConkey, but we knew that was probably because he was kind of coming back from an injury, so I couldn't find anything on it. I don't like either of the other 2 running backs in front of him, but I did see that depth chart blurb this morning. I can't remember which reporter that was from. If it's someone like we really like,
Daniel Popper had him not making the team in his
good.
Athletic write-up. He's pretty good. So
he had both Patterson and Isaiah Spiller over him. That's interesting.
I just don't understand, man.
Can you guys give me a reason why a 6th-round rookie, even if you're sure this early that you don't want to keep the 6th-round rookie, why you wouldn't
over
play
Spiller?
him in the second half of over Spiller? Like I can't imagine, even if they were there, even if the usage suggests that Jared Patterson and Spiller played in the first half, why didn't they give him some run in the second half at all, just to see what he looks like?
He did miss some days of practice, and so it's possible it's he's not fully healthy. And maybe he's on the roster bubble. They want to see what he actually looks like healthy. I don't know. Healthy.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't see how Isaiah Spiller makes a roster. Maybe that's just personal, like for me at this point.
Someone in the Spike Week Discord tagged me like 2 months ago to note that Harbaugh tried to recruit Isaiah Spiller, and that has made me
we're not hearing any buzz around him, like out of camp.
Just laps in Pat's brain.
That's just rent free. Whoever tagged me, I don't remember who tagged me, but your information lives
profile
rent-free.
Okay, like coming out, like I thought it was decent.
Yeah, Spiller was all right. Spiller was seen. I remember like when I was like catching up on the class before diving into like the stats and everything. That Spiller, this is all pre-combine. I'm talking like January of that incoming year. He was seen as like potentially in line with Brees. They were both these really young,
high second round picks.
Yeah, and then Spiller had a horrendous offseason process.
Everything ever.
One of the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah. But like there was a time where we thought Spiller was like a legit prospect. So I don't know.
He was good as a freshman. He was using the passing game, like played in the SEC, played for a good program. Yeah, he checked a ton of good boxes. Just didn't work out. So sorry to disappoint you with that one, Ben. If you got one more that you think you got that I might have a better answer for, I'd be willing to try.
I took a lot of him, and I mean a lot of people really like that profile. I'm sure. Did your model like him? I know JJ's model liked him. I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, he has a good.
I wasn't as high on him as JJ, but I did like him. And then Thor Nystrom at Fantasy Life loves him. And Thor's a film grinder. Yeah. Matt Waldman, who I talk with a lot, he's a film grinder. All the film guys love Vidal. Like they all like him.
He didn't rate that well in my stuff, but I was just like, this situation. I mean, you telling me other people like are into this guy? Great, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
So I was actually taking a decent amount of him.
Edwards' peripherals fell off a little bit, and I'm really concerned about him losing Lamar. Like I think that's probably buoyed
his
a big deal over the years.
For 2-down efficiency guy, losing Lamar seems like a big deal.
And then 5 yards per carry is now going to be 3.8. Like you can
right, exactly, immediately, and that's your whole game.
Now they have a good offensive line. They are pretty loaded on the offensive line. They've got a lot of draft capital loaded into the big boys up front. So, but teams are also going to load the box on them. They're going to dare them. They're going to say, Justin Herbert, let's see if your coach will let you throw the ball or not.
Yeah. We know your receivers suck too.
Let him audible.
Well, that's the problem. They don't even cover
throw to Quentin Johnston. We know he can't catch
let
the
him
ball.
run open. They treat Quentin Johnson like, the read option. There's one person, they're just like, we're basically inviting you to do this. Like, we're going to make you throw the ball. Yeah.
Honestly, he needs to convert to running back. That's how he gets on the field. I'm serious. I'm not kidding.
6'4" Quentin Johnston playing.
It's Corderell, baby. It's our generation's
the
Corderell.
pad level on a 6'5".
Yeah.
Amazing.
He was good after the catch in college. Like I don't know. I saw him
with the ball in his hands, Dwayne. With the ball in his
catch
hands.
a slant and like those thick quads, man. That
tall.
big ass.
There's no
thick quads. What's that
tall.
like? Big ass. Is that? Do any positions have thick quads and big asses? Is that a trait?
Mostly running backs.
Mostly running backs. His legs are way too long, Pat. He's got super long legs.
Well, everything else isn't working for receivers, so I'm saying maybe give it a try.
You get him on a wheel route, and he can drop that instead of just lining up at receiver and dropping it.
He can drop that.
Dropping that.
Jesus.
Oh
man, Dwayne, thanks for coming on, man. Tell
man,
everybody.
I appreciate you guys. Love what you guys do. Love what you guys do for the community, and you guys are always awesome at what you do. So pleasure to come on.
Tell everybody where they can see all your stuff. I mean, obviously fantasy life, but like specific notes on the stuff now and in season and all that.
Yeah. So fantasy life, guys, you just head over to fantasylife.com. You'll see I've got all the recap stuff up from this weekend's utilization for preseason, all that stuff. My film notes are kind of mixed in there along with all the data, so you guys can see that. We've also got utilization tools, Pat. I know that you've used those, but you can go in, you can actually see all this kind of stuff we're talking about, carries inside the 5, catchable target rates, all that stuff. We're also going to have a utilization score this year that's being worked on in the back end. That's really just helping you understand like which players have the best role on the team. So let's say you're like, Dwayne, I'm not a dork like you. Don't have time to come in and look all these numbers. I just need one number for a running back, and I need to know what's good, what's bad. So we're going to have that. Working on a couple of other things, but we've also got obviously all the ranks, everything up over there. Once the season gets here, like I'll have the utilization report every week, my rankings, projections. That stuff's all up for the preseason too. You guys can go check it out, fantasylife.com.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for coming on.
We should just
appreciate you guys.
Down.
All right. I didn't know if there was more slides or anything.
No, there's not.
Okay.
All right, see you guys.
Appreciate it, Dwayne.
Yeah.
Ben, anything to tell the people about before we get out of here?
No. Stealing signals. I wrote a piece called.
I think you do, because it's mid-August.
I guess so. You're always helping me try to keep my own stuff. Pretty terrible at it. I wrote no, you're right. I watched at least the first drive of every game, and in a lot of cases, multiple drives, and wrote a pre-season stealing signals piece for the subscribers. People seem to really like that. Sean sent me a note, said he really liked it already this morning, which was cool. I published that late last night. It's going to be less data heavy than Dwayne's. It's going to be more like, this is what I thought guys looked like. And I kind of made the case that we're looking for talent that can, rise to the top throughout the season. Because we're not just trying to, predict week 1 depth charts. That's not the whole game, right? Like we're also trying to think about the chaos that will come in season. And so a little bit more.
Brown look to you, because that I keep hearing he looked like ass, and I didn't really see it myself.
So he's one that I didn't have a real opinion on that. So I thought Dwayne's notes were actually really interesting. I just thought that his usage was good, and I saw him. Yeah, I didn't think he looked great, but I wrote that he caught a quick swing pass on the second snap. Also got a carry from the 9-yard line. Played the whole drive. So I was like, yeah, the usage was good. We didn't really get to see a lot, but when Dwayne was saying that, I was like, yeah, I didn't really formulate an opinion on how he looked, which probably means that he didn't do anything that was like, ooh, there's some bursts. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was just inclined to be like, to write it off as not his fault, because I'm like so into Chase Brown. Right. So that's why I actually like legitimately appreciated Dwayne's FUD on that, where it's like, yeah, I need to chill a little bit on Brown. Probably I take him in like every draft that I can right now, but there's a possibility he's just not good enough, right? So
yeah, there is that possibility for sure.
I thought his notes were really, really useful on him, but yeah, a lot of other backs that I did talk about from a skill perspective and all that stuff. So check that out. The ranks are always updated. I did an AMA at Reddit this morning, did about 2 hours of Q&A. That's all free and long answers and in-depth stuff. I got asked about overhyped players, and I listed like basically all the fades that I have this year. I got asked about sleepers, and I was just listing a bunch of the targets that I have this year. I mean, basically just gave away all the answers.
Yeah, it sounds like
AMA. So go ahead and go read that. A lot of strategy stuff. It was a fun one, but yeah, that's, all the other same stuff. Sean and I are doing round 1 and round 2 2025 ADP.
I love those
this week. We're going to record those tomorrow. So those are, nice. I've been asked about that a lot. Those are coming this week.
Awesome. I on Legendary Upside had a 4-part article series that came out last week. Check that out. We've got a article from Daniel Raz that came out Saturday looking at the same part of the draft. So my article series was breaking down the profiles of the running backs going through rounds 7 and 10. A lot of those are free, like the first 2 in each part. So like 8 running back profiles are above the paywall. So check out that even if you're not a subscriber. It's only $10 a month. I was going to raise the price and then I just didn't. So it's just $10 a month. So sign up, read all of that. Daniel Raz had an article looking at kind of 3 different paths of how to utilize the running back pricing to build teams, which is it's a really excellent piece. Stephanie Miller has an article coming out tomorrow on Dynasty auction draft, which is pretty interesting for all the Dynasty sickos out there. And then I have a bunch more content coming out on Legendary Upside as well. We have a question here. No Kylan Granson or Mo Alley Cox talk. I pulled up the wrong comment. Where is it? Where'd it go? No, I don't know. I can't
Rusty
find it.
Shackelford. It's at the top of the, yeah.
No Kylan Granson, Mo Alley Cox talk. Not this week, but Sam will be back. Don't worry. Sam will be back with his Colts charts. Davis will be back next week. Yeah, but until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time. And I'm supposed to play the outro, I think. Here it is.